The 2017 UCF Knights pulled off one of the most remarkable turnarounds in college football history, going from winless in 2015 to undefeated in just 2 seasons. They proved themselves as one of the best teams in the nation, ending the year as the only unbeaten program, and their journey wasn't easy, capped by a showdown against Auburn in the Peach Bowl. But what happened to UCF after this historic season? To uncover the full story and what came next, we need to rewind and look at how it all began. UCF's football's early years were interesting, to put it mildly. Starting as a Division III program under Coach Don Jonas, the team was pieced together with tryouts where players had to pay $14 a night for dorms and even bring their own uniforms.
Before we even got to the first day of practice, we didn't have any footballs. I mean, we had no equipment to speak of. We would have thought that the sporting good companies around here would have been knocking down the door to do that, but they weren't.
Talk about humble beginnings. Don Jonas led the team to a decent 14-12 record in Division III with 1 tie, and things would get rough when they made the jump to Division II, hiring Sammy Weir, a high school coach who turned out to be a disaster. The team tanked and went 0-10 their first season and spiraled to a brutal 7-25 over 3 years. It got so bad that the head coach at the time, Gene McDonald, had to cut his salary in half just to keep the program alive. But then McDonald would flip the script. By 1986, UCF had their first winning season since the 70s, followed by an 8-3 playoff run in 87, and now the number 2 team ranked in their division. Between years 1986 and 1990, they were a powerhouse, going 24-6. They jumped to Division I AA in 1990 and crushed it with a 10-4 debut, and by 1996, they were in Division I AA. But consistency remained a struggle. After Mike Kruzik's decent run, George O'Leary took over in 2004, and let's just say it was messy. His first season, a humiliating 0-11. Beyond these losses, the sources that I could find shared that his disciplinary style would cross the line, oftentimes punishing players far beyond what was actually necessary. So UCF bounced between highs and lows until 2015, when they would hit rock bottom with an 0-12 season, guys. So because of this, they would finally cut ties with O'Leary, a decision that the players and program would support. And up until this point, it's been a wild ride for UCF, just enough chaos and drama to make you wonder if they'd ever figure it out. UCF was in trouble once again, but seemed to have found what they needed. A young head coach who had winning experience at a bigger school.
Can't be more thrilled to be here than I am. Gonna spend a little time here, go back, get my stuff, and come back and get to work.
So in came Scott Frost, who was previously the wide receivers coach at Oregon. He would lead UCF to a hopeful 6-6 record, but no one would expect what was going to happen next. The 2017 season would not only change the program, but would change the landscape of how people looked at ranking college football teams. And if we break down the season, it isn't hard to notice that they dominated every week. They would have a solid defense that season, led by their popular one-handed football player, Shaquem Griffin. He has a crazy story in his own, but maybe that's for another video. Their quarterback, Mackenzie Milton, would pass for over 4,000 yards that season, and he was even a Heisman finalist that year. He did have help from a star receiver, Traquan Smith, a future 3rd-round draft pick. So as a group of 5 school, to have this much talent on a team was rare. Combined with the head coach, who actually had a history of winning football, you had a team that could dominate on the field. So because of this, UCF absolutely curb-stomped their competition almost every week. Led by Milton, the Knights would start week 1 by crushing FIU 61-17. This would be followed by a win 38-10 over Maryland, and a 40-13 win over arguably the 2nd best team in their conference, Memphis University. And it goes on and on. But there was one drawback to this absolute dominance. It uncovered a huge flaw in the college football ranking system. See, no matter how many games UCF won, their rankings seemed to be untouched. Now 11-0 in the season, they were ranked as the number 14 team in the country going into their conference championship game versus now ranked Memphis. They would win a back-and-forth battle in one of the largest scoring games that season, 65-55 in double overtime.
So many ups and downs, back and forth. 0-12 2 years ago to winning the championship. What are you feeling right now, man?
I don't know what to feel. I'm so happy for these guys. That's impossible what they've done. We've given them a lot. They've given us even more.
But despite this entire season, they didn't even crack the top 10. As a team now in the American Conference, or any school outside the Power 5 conference that isn't Notre Dame, the likelihood of you joining the newly established playoffs was slim to none. The committee didn't want to risk putting in a team like UCF and then have them get blown out by Alabama or Clemson, which would ultimately result in the committee getting blasted by the media and probably damage TV ratings. Not something you would want to happen during one of the biggest games of the year. And to make things even more interesting, Coach Frost confirmed that he would be taking a 7-year, $35 million deal to become the Nebraska's new head coach just hours after winning the AAC. Probably not what you want to hear as a team going into the most important game in program history. So Frost would return for one last game in the 2018 Peach Bowl. The number 12 ranked Knights would face the number 7 ranked Auburn. Auburn, although a 3-loss team, had proven to be one of the toughest teams in the country. They had played Clemson extremely close, losing 14-6 to a team that would later play in the college football playoffs. They did have a rough loss to LSU and a loss to Georgia in the SEC championship game, but they had beaten both Georgia and Alabama in the regular season. Now ranked number 7 in the country, Auburn would be a worthy opponent for UFC to prove if they had what it takes to compete in the college playoffs. So after a back and forth battle, UCF would defeat Auburn 34-27. Mackenzie Milton was selected as the offensive MVP with 245 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions, with 116 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown. Auburn couldn't recover from suffering with 3 turnovers that game. Also, there was this guy named Shaquem Griffin. I mentioned him earlier in the video, and you might remember him. This guy would go off for 12 tackles and 1.5 sacks, earning defensive MVP that game. Now, with this historic season over, it would be time to follow up with another dominating season. Surprisingly, despite their volatile record history, UCF didn't drop off immediately after 2017. After Coach Frost left for Nebraska, UCF would put their hopes in Josh Heupel, signing him to a 5-year contract. In Heupel's first season, UCF rode its high-powered offense to start the season 12-0 and extended its winning streak to a school record of 25 games. The undefeated 8th-ranked Knights were once again not selected for the college football playoff. Without Milton as their QB1, the Knights were beaten by future Heisman winner Joe Burrow and the LSU Tigers in the Fiesta Bowl, the beginnings of a team that would win the national championship the following year. Again, another game to remember, and probably the game that made Joe Burrow who he is today. The UCF Knights went 10-3 the following year, but then 6-4 in 2020. Heupel would get hired as the head coach for the Tennessee Volunteers in 2021, so UCF would bring in Gus Malzahn as the new head coach. Malzahn made a name for himself with a 68-35 record at Auburn from 2013 to 2020, including 3 wins over Alabama in the Iron Bowl rivalry, also an appearance in the 2014 BCS National Championship game, and 2 New Year's Six Bowl appearances. Ironically, his Auburn team lost to UCF in one of those New Year's Six appearances, which would be the historic 2018 Peach Bowl. The Knights did well in his first few seasons, but have slowly dropped off in recent years, posting a 4-8 record in the 2024 regular season. This would be the first time the team wasn't bowl eligible since George O'Leary's last year in 2015. Now at the end of the 2024 season, you guys might be wondering what happened to some of those star players from the 2017 team. Well, their quarterback Mackenzie Milton was hired by the University of Tennessee as an offensive analyst in 2023, reuniting with his former head coach Josh Heupel. Shaquem Griffin would get drafted into the NFL by the Seahawks, reuniting with his brother Shaquille, but after spending a few seasons with the Seahawks and joining the Miami Dolphins, Shaquille announced his retirement from the NFL in 2022. Traquan Smith was drafted in the 3rd round in the 2018 draft, and after 5 seasons with the Saints, signed with the Denver Broncos. But as of this year, Smith signed a reserve future contract with the Detroit Lions. Mike Hughes, an all-conference cornerback, was a 1st-round pick by the Minnesota Vikings, but now plays for the Atlanta Falcons. There are definitely some other key players I left out in this list, but just know this UCF team was stacked with talent. As for Scott Frost, after a rough run as the head coach at Nebraska, where he went 16-31 over 5 seasons without making a single bowl game, Scott Frost is getting another shot. This time, it's back at UCF, where the head coaching job opened up on November 30th. Gus Malzahn stepped down to join Mike Norvell's staff as the offensive coordinator at Florida State, a program that could definitely use the boost after this this season. So UCF wasted no time and locked in Frost on a 5-year deal through the 2029 season.
I'm excited to reintroduce and welcome back your next head football coach, Scott Frost.
Now, history does have a way of repeating itself, so if I would just follow my instincts, I think there's a solid chance that UCF will pick things up and have a solid season in 2025. And who knows, maybe they can even make it into the 12-team playoffs. After all, the 2017 UCF team is what really started the college football playoff conversation, and now we get to witness one of the most interesting and exciting seasons in college football history.